Okay. Catacombs of Priscilla. It's not Priscilla, it's Priscilla because it's Italian. I'm going to try and keep this as close to 8 minutes or less, or fewer, rather, as I can. All right. People have a misunderstanding of what catacombs are. Catacombs are really just burial places. They were not secret places for Christians to worship in private. Beth and Steve will talk about that in the video, which we'll watch after this. A term that you need to know that applies to so much work that we're going to be looking at for the rest of the year is syncretism. Syncretism is a term that applies to the process of using symbols, images, practices, beliefs from one tradition, one religion, usually, and using those practices and those from the old religion and using them in the new religion, okay, or the new tradition. Usually it's religion, but sometimes it's just general, like, cultural tradition. Why would that be important? Well, when you're trying to gain converts, when you're trying to get people to say, hey, yeah, we should follow this new way of thinking or this new way of believing, one good way to do that is to use things with which they are already familiar and they are already attached. For example, Christmas, celebrating the birth of Christ, because Jesus was born on December 25th. No, he wasn't. Okay, that particular date, that particular time of the year was used to celebrate Christ's birth because that was a particular pagan holiday, right? That had elements that somewhat aligned with Christ's birth story, right? That had some of those elements in it. So this is an extremely common practice. Every religion has done it. All right. So that's why you'll see so many stories from the Old Testament being used in early Christian art. Now, of course, the Old Testament and the New Testament are absolutely connected. This is part of the same line of belief. But why not use more New Testament images from in early Christian art if they're trying to get people to worship Christ? It's because the Jewish converts in particular would be super familiar with the Old Testament stories, right? And the Old Testament images. And so we can use some of those Old Testament images and talk about them and think about them in ways that help us to understand and believe in Christianity. And so that's why that happens so often. I'll give you a couple of examples later. So Jonah and the whale, for example, Jonah spends, days in the body of the whale, and then he gets out of the whale. He has a new life, right? So that's rebirth, right? Daniel in the lion's den, delivered from death, right? So this whole delivered from death idea that appears in Old Testament stories is extremely important and extremely connected to the Christian understanding and belief of the foundation of Christ and the offer of resurrection and new life. Okay? So we have the Good Shepherd image. The Good Shepherd image was actually a very popular image in Greek and other classical, i.e. Roman, sculpture. These pastoral images of this very young, attractive looking shepherd going off in search of one particular animal, in this case, a sheep, right? Why is that important? Well, because Christ says, well, I am the good shepherd, and I'm going to go after my lost sheep, et cetera, et cetera. So that just happens to align with that idea. That's one of the most important ideas that Christ has to offer his worshipers. So of course the Christians are going to use these classical images, right? So also the chi rho. Well, those are Latin. So those are Greek letters, right? Why are they using Greek stuff? Because those are symbols that the people of this time and place would have been familiar with. So chi rho, the first two letters of Christos. So this is why you see this symbol quite often in early Christian work. So syncretism, super duper important. All right. We call it the Greek chapel only because there was some writing in Greek on it, not because it was full of Greek people. That's the only reason. You see it's made of excavated tufa. Right, we know about tufa. And it's fresco. We know about fresco. It's plaster. It's wet plaster. The pigment is applied to the wet plaster. The color becomes part of the wall. Okay. So why is it called the Catacombs of Priscilla? It's because she was a noblewoman and she donated the space. That's pretty much it. It was full of sarcophagi of Christians, okay, and not just sarcophagi, but also bodies. You know, you had to have some money to have a sarcophagus. Sometimes you just got wrapped up in a sheet and got placed in a tomb. That should sound familiar to some of you. Okay. So one of the images that you need to know is the Orant Fresco. It is called the Orant Fresco because of the woman in the center, her arm positions, her arm position. Her arms are up in what is called the Orant position. Orant from the Latin word ora, which means prayer, right? Ora et labora, prayer and work, right? This is the prayer position. So what does this depict? This depicts the same woman 3 times, right? Here she's getting married. Excuse me. Here she has given birth. Here she is in a posture here that suggests that she has been resurrected. Okay, so this is the great promise. One of the great promises of Christianity is the resurrection into life after death. Okay, so 3 important moments in her life. She's wearing purple, which of course is associated with royalty. Not to suggest that she's a queen, but that there's something elevated and important and noble and royal about being not royal like you have power necessarily, but about being kind of risen again, from being Christian. Okay, the nobility that comes from Christianity, I guess, is one thing to how you might express it. There's a closer up image. You can see she's looking up. She's clearly very prayerful there, right? It's the same woman. You can tell here, right? All right, another fresco that you should know is this fresco there's a lot of writing here, but you don't need to pay attention to that. Let's just listen to me. This is a banquet scene. Why is a banquet scene important? Number of reasons. There would have been banquets for funerals, right? That makes sense. Where are we? We're in catacombs, all right? That's 1. 2, where else is eating with other people a big deal in Christianity? Oh, okay. It's going to be a reference to also the Last Supper, right? It's not the Last Supper. These are not the apostles, but the image here is suggestive of the Last Supper, of believers coming together and sharing a meal. And that action, that coming together and that sharing a meal becomes was one of the main things that Christians did together in the early days of Christianity. And of course, that develops liturgically into eventually the Eucharistic celebration in the Christian worship tradition. Okay. We also see some baskets, which are probably a reference. You know, you see baskets and they've got bread in them, and you think about the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. If you are not familiar, if Christianity is not the tradition from which you come and you don't know what I'm talking about, there is a video about, or an article at least, about Christianity on Khan Academy. I will link it. It's really important that you understand just the basics. I'm just talking about understanding. I'm not talking about believing, just understanding the basics, because without that, you're going to be lost for pretty much the vast majority of the rest of our Western study, which is the majority of what we do in this class is Western art. Okay. So I'll do the same thing when we start studying, Buddhism. For those of us who are not familiar with the Buddhist tradition, there'll be something that we need to study about that. Okay. I have run out of time. I promised to keep it about 8 minutes, so I'm a little bit over. There are a few more things that I will get to in class, specifically this Good Shepherd fresco. I've already talked about the Good Shepherd. These kind of half circles are called lunettes. The round spaces are called roundels. We see in the Good Shepherd, in the Catacombs of Priscilla, as I've said, lots of Old Testament stories and New Testament stories, and trying to connect those 2 ideas, right? The stories from the Old Testament and the New Testament. In particular, we'll see an image of the adoration of the Magi, which are the 3 wise men, the 3 kings that come to witness Christ's birth. Why is that important? Because they're considered like the first 3 The first three pagans, that would be non-Jewish worshipers of Christ. Okay. All right. So I'll stop there and I'll hit the rest in class. Thank you very much. I hope it was meaningful.